Okay, stage one, chords. All right, we want to talk a little bit about chord progressions and how you can take some basic stuff and change it around a little bit so that you can get an interesting chord progression to go with your surf tune. All right. Now, there's a couple different ways you can start off. You might start off with a chord progression that sounds good to you and start noodling around till you find a melody. You also may have a little bit of a melody and you want to figure out a chord progression that can go with that. Okay, let's first of all talk about some basic chord progressions that work really well with surf tunes. Now, of course, this is an idiom that has a very stylistic kind of thing. We're not going to look at tons and tons of possibilities. We're going to start with something simple and see how many variations we can find on that, or find a few variations, better put. Okay, now the surf idiom is really based in most cases around a 12-bar blues, the real classic tunes that everybody knows, like Pipeline, or by the Chantays, or the Safaris' Wipeout. Okay, really based strictly around a 12-bar blues kind of pattern, maybe with a little touch of change in there. Okay, the Chantays' Pipeline, all right, just is sort of tick-tocking along on an E minor chord for a while, waiting for that wave. Okay, then it goes up to an A minor. Okay, and keeping it simple is a real cornerstone of the surf kind of stuff too. Now that's a real simple riff, just alternating between E and B, G and B. Okay, palm muting it gives it that idiomatic surf sound that gets that spring reverb really ticking along. Okay, now that one goes through from an E minor to an A minor. So that's a 1 chord in minor, okay? 4 chord is minor. Then it goes to a 5 chord major, B, okay? B major. Briefly moves up to a C major. Okay. Now moving a half step above the 5 chord is a typical move. That's something that's done in a lot of chord progressions. It's always a useful thing to build some tension. If you want to learn more about those kind of things beyond this, what we're talking about here, kind of beginner's level adjustments to a 1-4-5, check out our chord and harmony DVDs on the site. I put a link below that goes over a lot of stuff like this and into a lot more chord progressions for working on your songs. All right, little advertisement there. Okay, back to the program. Coming back out of that 5 chord, hangs on the 4 chord for a second, and then comes into that great surf lick, and we're back to the top of the tune. All right, so that kind of stuff is all based around a 12-bar blues, in this case in minor. Okay, so a minor blues kind of chord progression. All right. Another example was I was talking about Safaris' Wipeout. That one's really in C, and it's all major, and there's sort of this sort of a fall bass line going on the bottom. I think the bass guitars are doing the same thing, so it's just this real simple riff. There's not really a melody to that because the drums are going the whole time, but that riff follows a real strict 12-bar blues in that case. All right, and that's just based around the C, and then it's going up to an F. Okay, aiming for an F. So C is 1, F is 4. Then it's gonna, of course, go to a G. Okay, back. So 5, 4, 1. And then turn on the 5 and come back. And that's always with a pickup. It seems like it might start on a G, but you're aiming for the C, and you can hear that in the motion of the notes. All right, so the resolution there is important to know what chords you're on, okay? So what you're aiming for. That's really, in C, a 1-4-5, all right? And that's a major kind of sound. Personally, I lean towards digging the minor blues kind of sound. Although this little tune that I worked out really was working out over an E major chord to a D major chord. And then I wanted to get a little minor sound in there, so I just changed the A, what would have been an A major, if we were sticking to those typical major chords, move that, all right, into an A minor. And that made it sound a little bit more surf-like to me, because that minor chord really speaks of surf, all right? So that was just a field decision then, okay? Now let's talk about where that kind of progression would come from, okay? If we had a blues kind of progression in A, 1, A, 4, D, 5, E, 1, A, okay? If you had that, you don't necessarily need to start on the A chord, okay? Now that's, might sound a little strange. Is it a blues in A if you start there, or what is it, okay? Let's look at the progression that I used for a second, which was E twice, to D, to A minor. E twice, the D, the A minor, okay? So that really focuses on the E by hanging in there a little longer, okay? Let's take it down here. E, okay, 2 bars in there. So that puts E into the ear, and we're starting there too. We're kind of starting on the 5 chord. Then we move to the D, okay? Now, a lot of times, if you're starting for a couple bars on an E chord, a lot of people expect to hear that moving to the 4 in A. So moving to D is kind of a little bit of a cooler sound. Now, that was a typical pop and rock and kind of chord progression used in the 60s and still used today a lot, all right? But it still has that little bit of a surprise, moving down, okay, moving from an E down to a D instead of moving up to the 4. So that's a cool variation on this. Okay, now typically you would move through that A and back to the E because that's kind of where that's coming from. It's sort of this block of chords based around in 1, 4, 5, and A. But the more we hang on that E, the more this starts to sound like a chord progression in E. So we might call this what it's referred to as a 1, 7, 4, 1. Okay, and the 7 is not the standard 7 from a major scale. It's really the flat 7 because if you were in E major, the 7th note of the scale would actually be a D sharp. Okay, that would be your typical E major. But in this case, it's sort of like an E dominant kind of sound, right? Because it kind of leads us back to the thought that we're in ultimately in a 1, 4, 5 in A because the E would be the dominant chord. But you don't have to focus on that one chord. So this is a cool little idea to sort of expand your palette of chord progressions. Okay, now making that A into a minor chord also reduces the sense of that A minor being like a home chord and reinforces the E being there too. So that was a minor little change to this chord progression as well, all right? And let's talk about the rhythm as well. That's a pretty standard surf rhythm. It's one you gotta know for playing surf tunes, and that's if you listen to the drums, it's quite often it's the kick, snare, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, snare, kick, snare. Okay, listen to the Pulp Fiction soundtrack. I think every second song at least uses that rhythm. Okay, so taking this chord progression that we got to here. Okay, so there's your stock surf rhythm. All right, now if you check out bands like Man or Astro Man and other bands that have taken surf music a little bit further, that's still kind of a standard rhythm that goes on in there. So that's one that you got to have down. And the strumming pattern for that, again, we're kind of giving you something here for beginners, people that might not have a lot of experience with this. So you're going to be going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay, just strumming like that the whole time. So you're strumming, you can really kind of hit the strings the whole time if they're muted. That's what I'm doing, is just then pushing my fingers down at the points where you want to hear the chords. And all right, so you just grab those strings and otherwise leave them muted, and then you're going to get that rhythm coming out. And you're going 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Okay, and strum those strings with a okay, on the, especially here with this reverb sound, it's going to really help fill out that space. Okay, let's talk about another progression then. Let's do it in A minor and do it 1, 4, 5 style, okay? And now what we're going to talk about is taking a melody that you might have come up with and putting that finding a chord progression for that. So if you're starting with a melody, you might want to start with the typical thing, which would be to move from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. Okay, you can see if that's working with your melody or if that's the kind of sound that you have in your head. And if you don't like it, you can try another chord progression, but that might really work for you, okay? Let's come up with a little melody just based on A minor here. Okay, that'll work good. Okay, it's just really based around the minor pentatonic scale. Okay, all right, using some notes in between that blues note. Okay, we've got DVDs that talk about that too. Guitar Concepts will go through all the possible additional notes to add to your pentatonic scales. So if you want to learn more about that, check out that DVD on the site. Okay, for this one here, this was going... Or you can play it like this. Okay, so you're just moving through that pentatonic scale with the flat 5 in there. Okay, aiming for the root. Okay, so let's take that chord, that rhythm, and do, let's say that was our starting melody, okay? We're gonna think, what do we have to do with that melody to get it to fit over D minor, okay? Now, in that case, you're gonna be moving up a fourth, okay, which is the equivalent of moving up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets, okay? And due to the parallel nature of the guitar, really cool is you can take that same melody and just simply move it up those 5 frets, and the melody will work then over D minor. Pardon a little mistake there. Okay, you can articulate the melody however you want. Okay, let's just lay it down here. I'll use that sampling pedal to get that rhythm going. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that'll cycle through. All right, that'll give us a little background to play this over. Now, the way this is lined up here, let me turn it down for 1 second. We'll get in with the repeat. All right, it'll be the first melody on A minor twice. Okay, so we'll go through it now. Okay, here comes the turnaround. Okay, you can come up with some kind of a turnaround melody to go with that too, okay? So that's a real useful and typical way to get your melody moving along. So if you just had a simple melody, move it up to the 4 chord and come back, all right? Now, by messing around with qualities of the chords, maybe major, minor, perhaps taking the melody and moving it in a different way, starting on the 5 chord, down through 4 and that kind of thing, you'll find some variations on that, all right? Now, another typical surf style kind of melody would be to start on your 1 chord, excuse me, not melody, but rhythm I'm talking about here, chord progression, sorry. Would be to start on that 1 chord like that, and to get to the 5 chord, in order to turn it around, instead of moving to the 4 and coming back, you're going to start to just descend, all right? And in this case, we're going to be treating this chord then as if it were the 6th chord in a chord progression, okay? So A minor would be treated like if we were overall in the key of C, from the key signature, but we're gravitating towards the A note, which would make it then A minor, okay? And, all right, the 5 chord E7 being a major chord, a dominant 7th chord. Use this, all right? Again, the chord and harmony guide will help you with this stuff if these chords are a little above your head, okay? Or if you want to learn these kind of ideas and go further, all right? About 4 hours on those DVDs. Check them out. We're going to go down from the A minor. Okay, go down through a G, go down through an F, and get to the E major like that. So another way of starting at our root chord and getting around and getting back to that, okay? And the cool thing about that is you can also then start to take your melody and adjust it to those other chords as you move it down. All right, okay, that might not be dominant. Okay, that would be just sort of off the top of my head there, following those arpeggios, okay, coming down through the chords, all right? If you want to find out more about that, again, check out the DVDs on the site, all right? I'm going to stop plugging that, okay? We're going to move on now to the next section, okay? Having looked at these chord progressions and some ways of picking your starting chord and getting back around to there, all right? So next section is taking a melody and working from there, okay? Hear the doorbell ringing. Gotta go. See you in the next section. It'll be posted called Part 3 right here on YouTube, or go to the blog.